Welcome back to the Retro Vault, where we'll be looking at and diving into stories from games of old. In the previous episode, we looked at the story behind the horror classic Clock Tower. In this episode, we'll be going all Western and looking at the story of a pretty decent and underrated PlayStation 2 game called Gun. Set in the late 1800s, Gun featured a star-studded cast with Thomas Jane, Lance Henriksen, Chris Christopherson, Ron Perlman and Tom Skerritt all voicing characters in the game. A lot of the characters in-game were based on real-life counterparts of the same or similar name. Gameplay-wise, this game was pretty simple in terms of the gunplay. Pacing of the game was good and provided a decent difficulty curve. I played through the game on normal difficulty. You had to complete a few side quests, such as bounty hunting, being a ranch hand and herding cattle, keeping the peace in towns for the federal marshals or the sheriffs, and also mining for gold, and using that money to buy upgrades for your weaponry. The game was pretty short at 6 hours, but I do feel that the story was concise and well told throughout the course of the game, with no real unnecessary plot filler. We're going to dive into the setting the game takes place in first, so let's begin. The game takes place in the year 1880, in the American Old West, but let's start by going back 20 years or so. In the year 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected as the 16th President of the United States. The slave owners of the South were worried that their plantations were under threat due to the new administration and began the process of separating themselves from the United States. This separation, called secession, was comprised of 11 US states: North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, and Tennessee. The Confederate States of America was birthed in February 1861, and by April 1861, the Confederate States would go to war against the United States. This brought about the American Civil War. This Civil War lasted for 4 years until 1865, and the government of the Confederacy crumbled. One of the most high-profile failures of the Confederacy was the surrender of General Robert Edward Lee. It was also around this time that President Lincoln was assassinated, being shot in the head by John Wilkes Booth whilst watching a play at Ford's Theatre in Washington, D.C. The motive of the assassination was an act of revenge for the Confederate States. Booth actually failed in his aims, as he wanted to kill 2 additional people, Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William H. Seward, both of them high-ranking members of the US government. Anyway, the Confederacy was then dissolved, officially by Confederate President Jefferson Davis on the 5th of May, 1865. After this, the Reconstruction era started, and the Confederate States were admitted to Congress, and the 13th Amendment was introduced to the US Constitution, and this outlawed slavery. Near to the end of the American Civil War, many soldiers in the Confederate Army had deserted due to not being fed, and due to their families struggling back home. It got to the point that 2/3 of the Army's soldiers had at one point deserted. Some would return to the Army, but most didn't, as they felt their families were more important than the Confederacy. I know it probably feels like I'm waffling about history at this point, but this is all relevant, as it's building the setting around the game and links into certain characters, which you'll see later on in the story. In Montana, Colton Cole White and his father Ned are out hunting game to sell to the many steamboats traveling the Mississippi River. After hunting elk, along with quail, and fending off some wolves, Ned is attacked by a huge grizzly. It swats Ned out of the way, so Colton has to take the massive beast down. Ned gets to his feet, still feeling a bit worse for wear, and Colton skins the bear. After, Colton and Ned board the SS Morning Star and sell the game, making some money. Whilst on the deck of the Morning Star, Ned disappears into a room with a woman named Sadie, and they look inside a safe, and then Ned closes the door. Colton is then approached by a rather disheveled and shady-looking preacher, who rather swiftly leaves once Ned and Sadie leave the room. Colton sees the preacher talking to and grabbing Sadie, demanding to know where something is, so she can save the lives of everyone on the boat. Sadie slaps him, running off, but he throws an axe at her, which strikes her in the head, killing her instantly. The preacher then signals for a group of renegades, who are crazed former Confederate soldiers, to attack the boat, and both Colton and Ned have to take them out. Keel boats end up attacking too. Unjamming the steamboat's wheel, Colton then mans a cannon and shoots any attacking boats, completely destroying them. After fighting off any remaining renegades, Ned tells Colton that he hasn't really been honest with him about who he is. He explains that the boilers will blow soon and gives him a token for the Alhambra townhouse in Dodge City. Colton needs to ask for Jenny. He explains that he isn't Colton's real father, and then shoves Colton into the water, and the steamboat explodes as a result of the boilers. After this, the preacher enters a train car and approaches a fairly large man named Thomas Magruder. He was a major in the Confederate States Army and now leads an outfit called the Texas Mountain Rifles. Anyway, the preacher was clearly working for him. He explains that he was not able to retrieve the missing item that he was sent to the steamboat for. Magruder is furious. The preacher explains that the item is in the safe and the boat is now sunk to the bottom of the river. Magruder, as payment for the preacher's failure, takes the preacher's ear. As for Colton, after he made it to shore, he passed out, and then 3 days later he wakes up to a man named Honest Tom holding the Alhambra token that Ned gave to him. Tom explains that no one survived the Morning Star attack. Asking where Dodge City is, Tom replies that it's through a nearby pass and is about a day's ride away. Tom has taken an interest in the Alhambra token and offers a wager, a race on horseback. Since Colton doesn't have a horse and needs to get to Dodge City, he accepts. Racing Tom around the meadow a few times, he wins and gets to keep the horse, but honest Tom is not so honest after all, and his associates show up and attempt to kill Colton. After taking them out, Colton moves through the pass and eventually arrives at a ferry. The ferry operator says that he's lucky, as this is his last run across the river, as a band of Apaches are on the warpath and have destroyed the bridge out of Dodge City as they object to a new railroad being built that connects Dodge City with the more established Empire City in New Mexico, as the railroad is being built across their land. Oh, and the railroad is owned by the very wealthy Thomas Magruder. The operator takes him across the river, and Colton has now arrived in Dodge City. Heading into the Alhambra, he speaks with the bartender, who introduces him to Jenny, who is speaking with two men. Jenny and the bartender are both very shocked to hear about Sadie's death. Leading Colton upstairs, the men are not very pleased.
He ain't getting a poke before us.
Let go of me!
Not till I'm done with you, bitch. Come on!
A firefight kicks off and Colton, Jenny and the bartender are attacked by the Red Hand gang. Colton fights his way through them, and after he's done he speaks with Jenny. She reveals a box of stuff that Ned left there and that Sadie had stashed for Ned. Inside, a revolver along with some clothing and some pictures. Jenny suspects that Sadie and Ned were in love. She explains that Sadie left the Alhambra for more upgraded facilities and went to Empire, but that she ran off not long after she went there. Jenny says that as soon as the railroad is up and running, she's off to Empire to replace her. All of a sudden, a whiskey bomb flies through the window, and Colton and Jenny have to fight their way out as more of the Red Hand gang attack. After annihilating them all and preventing arsonists from burning down the place, Colton is confronted by the Red Hand gang's leader, Crude. Colton quickly eliminates him and what remains of his gang. He is then approached by the city marshal, Pat Denton. He says that he would have helped, but he's been out at the bridge as the Apaches are causing trouble. Pat wants to hire Colton to help him with his Apache problem, as the Chinese workers constructing the railroad need protecting. Jenny leads Colton upstairs for some R&R. Getting dressed, Colton tells Jenny about the preacher he met, and she names him as Reverend Josiah Reed. She mentions that the Reverend showed up there at the Alhambra a week prior and was looking for Sadie, and that he'd come from Empire. She names the mayor of Empire as Hoodoo Brown, and she says that Brown may be able to help Colton find Reed. Colton needs to help the marshal get the bridge constructed so he can get out of Dodge City, so after paying Jenny for her time, he leaves. Speaking with Pat Denton, an Apache named Quick Killer has managed to shut down the construction of the bridge for the railroad. Colton needs to hold off the Apache attackers, giving the workers a chance to finish constructing the final section of the bridge. The Apaches also ran off with a box of TNT the previous evening too. Taking the Apaches down and disposing of the TNT into the river, Colton makes his way back to Denton. After this, they both work together to kill any Apaches that attempt to kill the workers, and eventually they stop attacking, and the final section of the bridge is put into place. Denton narrowly avoids an arrow to the head, and Colton spots Apaches gearing up for another attack. With many barrels of TNT on the bridge, the Apaches want to try and blow them up to destroy the bridge, so Colton, with his expert marksmanship, shoots all of the flaming arrows out of the sky. Killing all the attackers, Colton then has to deal with the leader, Quick Killer himself, and puts him down. With the road to Empire now open, Colton and Jenny can leave Dodge City. Jenny will leave via stagecoach, and Colton needs to protect it from any attacking Apaches. They head through the Badlands, and Colton shoots any attackers and blows up any barriers that are in the way. Following a rather tense ordeal, they eventually do make it to Empire, New Mexico. It's there that they meet the mayor of Empire, Hoodoo Brown. He welcomes them to Empire and tells Jenny to head inside his casino and freshen up, and for Colton to explore the town and that they'll chat soon. A man on a horse screams about Brown being a lying rat and throws a firebomb at a store. New town, same problems. After getting acquainted with the city by carrying out some bounty work or helping the marshals keep the peace, Colton heads into the casino and speaks to Hoodoo Brown's deputy, Rudabar. Inside Brown's office, Colton is introduced to Brown's other deputy, Webb. Asking about the preacher, Brown says that if Colton helps him out by serving as a deputy, he'll have the added bonus of being backed by the law if Reed ever shows his face there in Empire. A man runs into the room and says that he spotted Chavez, a member of a resistance group who has been spotted at a local saloon. Upon going there and speaking to the bartender, Chavez was seen speaking with two men. The men spot that Colton is the law and open fire on him. Taking out the resistance there in the saloon, Chavez walks in, sees the carnage and does a runner. Chasing him across the Badlands in an attempt to capture him, he leads the deputies to a ranch. They check out the barn.
Please, don't kill us.
Let us go.
Guess we missed Chavez.
Word, we swear. No!
Whoa, what are you doing? They were unarmed.
Bullshit. This Gracer was pulling a gun. Didn't you see it?
I saw it clear as day.
You better get wise, kid, if you want to stay alive.
You shot those folks in cold blood. I'm taking you to Hoodoo.
You dumb rube. Who do you think we take orders from?
Hoodoo's been playing you and your little whore like a fiddle.
Keep your hands up.
What are you gonna do? Shoot us in cold blood?
Yeah, Rube. Who's the murderer then?
After this uncalled for act of brutality and murder, Colton fights and kills Brown's two deputies and heads back to Empire to confront him. Colton informs Brown that he killed both Webb and Rudabar. Threatening Brown, he says that Reed has indeed showed up and is in a room with Jenny, who lured him there. Colton hears Jenny scream, and running into the room, he witnesses Reed kill Jenny. Brown then smashes a bottle over Colton's head. Once awake, it's revealed that Hoodoo Brown is also working for Thomas Magruder. Magruder seems to know Ned and is surprised that Ned was still alive. He backslaps Colton and says that soon Colton will die via hanging, as he's to be framed for the murder of Jenny. Colton is then knocked out by Reed. He then wakes up inside a jail cell alongside a man that's been beaten black and blue. He introduces himself as Port. Port is a member of the Resistance. He was the guy on the horse that torched the printing press. Another man speaks up. He's called Soapy and he's a safecracker. Port explains about who Magruder is and about how he's trying to take over territory, and that the Resistance and the Apaches are the only ones fighting back. Needing to escape from their prison, Colton grabs one of the guards, and he says that Hoodoo has the keys for the cells. Taking the guard out, Colton picks the lock using the pin on the guard's badge. Escaping with Port, Colton steals 3 horses and stashes them under a bridge and uses a barrel of TNT to blast Soapy free from his cell. The 3 men then escape the town. Soapy separates from them and Colton and Port ride to the Resistance's camp. Once there, 2 men at the camp spot Colton and they recognise him as one of Hoodoo Brown's deputies. Port vouches for Colton and says that he killed Rudabar and Webb. One of the men, called Clay, looks at a photo Colton has of Ned, and it seems that Clay knows Ned. Not only that, but he served with him in the war. But bizarrely, he states that Ned was killed in action 10 years ago. Port explains that the Resistance and Colton have a common goal, as they are all after Thomas Magruder. They then formally welcome Colton to the Resistance. Sometime later, Colton speaks with Clay, and Clay says that Magruder sent a Gatling gun from Dodge City on a train, and that Port is by the railroad laying a trap in order to try and capture it. Meeting up with Port, Colton helps by carrying a number of TNT barrels to a wall of loose rocks. Placing them ready for the trap, Clay learns that some of their guys, including Chavez, have come under fire from Magruder's men on the train, and will be massacred if they can't get to them on time. After helping them out, Colton and Clay rush back to the ambush site before the train can get there. Colton then shoots the TNT barrels, causing rubble to block the track. The train then smashes into the blockage and is destroyed. As expected, Magruder's men attempt to protect what's theirs, but taking them all out, the Resistance now have their prize, the Gatling gun. Upon opening the train car though,
Looks like you aren't the only ones being driven off your land.
Bet you Magruder's using them for slaves.
Get him out of there!
They want water. Bring up some canteens.
Oh, shit.
Then
Then take them home.
Inde slago na since said na di tin beka.
Now I've set many free.
Where did you learn Apache?
I'm not sure. It's like I could understand what he was saying, but I couldn't quite speak it.
Better get back to the hideout and plan our strike.
Back at the hideout, the Resistance are celebrating. Colton takes the chance to ask about Ned. Clay tells him that Magruder was their commanding officer during the Civil War. Clay says that 14 years prior in 1864, Magruder had gotten authorization to go on a secret mission to find a place called Quivira, an ancient city full of gold. Ned led the soldiers under Magruder's command to a doctor named Dr. Campbell, who had something Magruder really wanted. A cross called the Cross of Coronado. More on that later. Essentially, this meeting went bad, as Magruder executed an Apache man, shooting him in the head. Magruder then shot Ned due to his protestations, which is why Clay thought Ned had died. Clay came out of the house and had found the cross. Magruder then killed the doctor too, cutting off his head. An Apache woman came out of the house and shot the cross, splitting it in two, and Magruder was hit, losing an eye. This resulted in Magruder's men slaughtering everyone there. The cross was taken from Magruder though, as he was knocked out. Clay explains that Magruder's one aim is to find Quivira. To him, it's the Holy Grail, and he'll stop at nothing to find it. The Resistance's party hasn't lasted long, as Magruder's militia have arrived at the camp. Going down to meet them, Colton uses a rifle to pick off the militiamen one by one. Despite the militia's superior numbers, the Resistance are able to push Magruder's militia back. They're not finished yet though, as they brought a cannon to the fight. Once again fighting through the militiamen, Colton takes control of the cannon, and this means that the Resistance have managed to capture more firepower from Magruder. After the battle, Colton learns from Port that the militia captured Clay and have taken him to Empire. The Resistance members are disheartened by this, but Colton tells them that they've got a howitzer and a Gatling gun, so that they should assault Empire, as Magruder's men won't be expecting that move from them at all, so they head off for Empire. They arrive and launch a full-scale assault on Empire. Taking out a lot of Magruder's guys, they need to hurry, as Hoodoo Brown is getting to work on Clay and is torturing him. Entering the tunnels through the Chinese laundry, Colton takes out many more men and reaches Clay, but Hoodoo Brown runs off. Fighting his way through Hoodoo's casino, Colton catches up to him and corners him. Injured, he pleads with Colton to show him mercy. Asking him why the steamer was attacked, Hoodoo explains that there was something on board inside the safe that Ned and Sadie were messing around with. Sadie had stolen it from Magruder. Hoodoo explains that the safe will be under 10 feet of water now and is inaccessible. Colton kicks a weapon over to Hoodoo, and picking it up, the two face off again, and Colton fires a final shot and sends him flying through the window to the street below. After this, Hoodoo is placed inside a coffin, with his body on display, with crows pecking at his dead body in order to shame him for what he did. Colton speaks to the Resistance and says that he needs to find the safe, as whatever is inside it could likely be used to bring Magruder down. To do that, he needs to find Soapy, as his safe cracking skills could be very useful. Heading back to Dodge City, Colton finds Pat Denton tied up on the bridge, and freeing him, he says that a mob attacked the town, and that mob are to lynch poor Soapy at the gallows after he tried to cheat during a game of cards. Ascending to the top of the water tower and armed with a rifle, Colton shoots the rope, freeing Soapy, and after fighting their way out of the town, they escape via the ferry crossing. Meanwhile, Magruder is furious again and shouts that Empire was his foundation. Hearing from Reed that Colton was just in Dodge City rescuing a safecracker, Magruder realizes that Colton is going to try and go for the safe on the steamboat. Magruder says that Reed lost the safe, so he should go and get it back. After a fairly long journey, Colton spots a large encampment. A fort, in fact. This is a problem, as they must go through the fort in order to get to the steamboat. Unfortunately, that problem has been settled for them, as someone puts a gun to Soapy's head. It's a couple of renegades along with their leader, Sergeant Hollister, a soldier who himself disappeared sometime during the Civil War. His men take Colton and Soapy to the fort. Colton notices that Hollister has Ned's rifle, and upon asking him where he got it, he replies that he pried it from the cold dead hands of an Indian-loving fool. Reed has showed up, and he and Hollister depart for the steamboat. Colton says that they need to escape and get to the safe before them. Saving some Indian braves who are being beaten by Hollister's renegades, they all manage to escape the fort undetected, and after stealing horses, the braves say that they'll meet them at their village, and Colton and Soapy ride to their freedom. Arriving at the village, the Indians are being attacked by more renegades, so Colton takes them out. The Braves' leader, Fights at Dawn, states that the white men at the fort keep attacking them wherever they go and steal their women. He says that soon they won't exist. Colton offers a different outlook. He says that if they destroy the fort and the men inside, that threat will be removed. Fights at Dawn says the white men have cannons, but Colton says that if they destroy the cannons first, they can succeed, so they assault the fort. One by one they capture the fort's cannons, then they use them to destroy the fort's bunkers, and after a huge effort they take the fort. After all cannons are captured and the fort has been taken, Fights at Dawn says that Hollister escaped and that he must not live. Moving to a small island on the shore, they are attacked and Fights at Dawn is wounded. Hollister and Colton fight. As expected, the sergeant is tough, but eventually Colton wounds him enough so that he retreats. As one final act of desperation in order to try and impress Magruder, Hollister straps sticks of dynamite to himself and runs at Colton, but ends up only blowing himself up. With Hollister dead, Colton retrieves Ned's old Ferguson rifle. Fights at Dawn is revealed to be okay after being wounded by the blast, and Colton says goodbye to Fights at Dawn, and he and Soapy head to the steamboat. Since the steamboat was destroyed, the water level has dropped considerably, so the safe is no longer underwater. It seems that if Colton wants access to the safe, he'll have to fight for it as more of Magruder's men have showed up. Taking them all out, Colton has Soapy crack the safe. It takes him no time at all, and inside the safe is one part of the Cross of Coronado. However, the Reverend Josiah Reed has turned up, eager to take the piece of the cross for himself. Of course, a fight ensues, but Colton easily takes down the preacher.
You can't! I'm unarmed! You kill me and your soul will be as cursed as mine!
This is for Jenny.
With the piece of the cross in their possession, Colton and Soapy work out where it's from and mention that it's incomplete, but Colton knows where the other part might be, as he claims that he's seen it before. Meanwhile, news reaches Magruder that the preacher has failed in his task, and that the preacher is dead. He responds to news that Colton has the contents of the safe by placing a bounty on his head. Colton has now perfected the art of winding up Magruder without even being in the same room as him. Colton reveals that he suspects the Apache chief Many Wounds has the other half of the cross. Meeting up with Soapy at the Apache camp, the Apache warriors have unfortunately bore the brunt of Magruder's rage. He had them killed, skinned, and hung. Colton and Soapy are then confronted by Apaches. They are taken before Many Wounds, who appears to have the Cross of Coronado tattooed on himself. Asking why they're there, Colton says that he seeks something that Many Wounds possesses, which of course is the other part of the cross. Another warrior gives Colton a bag full of stuff. But before we continue, let's talk about Quivira. Alright, so Quivira is a place that was first visited by Spanish conquistador Francisco Vázquez de Coronado whilst he was searching for the 7 cities of gold, which were largely a myth. But how did he find it? So conquistadors were former Spanish or Portuguese soldiers who carried out exploration during what was known as the Age of Discovery. His second expedition, which went from what was called New Spain or Mexico all the way to present-day Kansas, took place from 1540 to 1542, and it was on this expedition that Coronado would mark the very first sighting of the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River. The 7 cities of gold were named Cibola in 1539 by a Franciscan, a member of the Italian Catholic Church, called Marco Danizza. When Coronado visited Cibola, he was pretty underwhelmed, as many of the stories he'd heard about the riches were made up. He did, however, hear a rumour whilst there that there was a city full of gold, and that it was called Quivira, and that it was located in the Great Plains. But legend has it that Coronado was to be even more disappointed as he found nothing there. It's thought that the tribesmen who gave him the tip wanted him and his expedition to get lost in the Great Plains. This is where the game merges with real-life history. During this expedition, Coronado found the cross, and it was named the Cross of Coronado. It's not clear what happened to it after this, but at some point it was claimed by the Apaches, as they clearly did not want people tearing apart the Great Plains searching for riches and treasures. This all kicked off one day in 1862 when Thomas Magruder, who remember was a major in the Confederate States Army at this point, wanted to know where the location of Quivira was. As the Civil War wasn't proving very fruitful for the CSA, Magruder convinced them that if he was able to find these riches and the tide of the war would turn, in their favor. However, Magruder was just serving his own self-centered ambition. He would eventually meet Ned White, who merely mentioned to Magruder that a white man, a doctor, had been to Quivira himself. And like that, Magruder was like a rabid dog. He became obsessed with it, so they visited this doctor. As Clay mentioned to Colton during the Resistance's celebrations, Magruder and his men went to see him. But what Clay did not know is that there was a baby and a young boy there at the house. The boy was the doctor's son, and his mother was Apache, the Apache woman who shot the cross, wounding and knocking out Magruder. Prior to her death, the mother gave the baby to the young boy and told him to hide himself. The young boy hides while he witnesses his father, Stonehand, get executed by Magruder and the subsequent massacre. The young boy is revealed to be Many Wounds, and as a young boy, he vowed to avenge his father's death. Ned survived being shot by Magruder, obviously, and tells Many Wounds that as payment for his actions in leading Magruder there, he may take his life. But Many Wounds hands the baby to Ned and tells him that he can make up for it by raising the baby as his own son. That baby would grow up to be Colton White. With Colton finding out that he is Apache himself after Many Wounds shared the story with him, he realizes that Ned was trying to make things right for what he'd done. Many Wounds throws his axe, and it turns out that he's built an axe out of the second piece of the cross. Putting the pieces together and noticing markings, Many Wounds shows them where he's seen them before. He takes them to a location, and on the way, he reveals the location of the house where the massacre took place and where Colton's real father was killed. They are ambushed by Magruder's militia, and after taking them out, Colton and Soapy head up to the top of a mountain, where they stand and line up the cross with a rock in the canyon. It sits above Magruder's mine, which means he's been digging in the wrong place in his search for Quivira. Unfortunately, the setting sun glistening off the cross has alerted more of the militia to their presence, so after Sophie is yeeted from the cliff, falling down the mountain but surviving, Colton must fight his way back down the mountain. It's not good for Soapy as he's grabbed by Magruder's right-hand man, Dutchy, and is tortured for the location of Quivira. Soapy isn't made of tough stuff at all, and after having been tragically separated from some of his fingers, he understandably breaks, and whilst Magruder is not looking, he crawls off the train and escapes. After Colton has fought his way down the mountainside, he finds Soapy on the ground. He tells Colton that he had to give up the location of Quivira. Hearing Magruder's train approaching, Colton tells Soapy that Many Wounds and his men, along with Clay and what's left of the Resistance, are gathered on the other side of the mountain, and tells Soapy to get them to meet him back there at dawn. Magruder's lackey, Dutchy, is there, as he's just dropped his boss off at the mine. Colton has to fight off a number of elites, but after doing so, he takes out Dutchy. Using Magruder's train to get to the mine, Colton helps Clay get aboard. He says that the rest of the men are waiting at Magruder's mine, but that the doors to the site are solid steel. It's almost like they'll need something big and heavy to smash through them. Stoking the fires, pushing the train to maximum speed, they approach the doors and the train smashes into them. Entering the site, they push through, clearing out militiamen and destroying any artillery that Magruder has for his defenses. Moving through the tunnels in the mine, Colton has come to the entrance of Quivira, and Big Bad Magruder awaits him inside the City of Gold. So it appears the legends were correct, and this is indeed the Lost City, and it's filled with gold.
I've been searching for this.
Has it been worth all the bloodshed?
How can you ask a question like that when your eyes are feasting on such magnificence?
I don't see anything magnificent. Just a fat, one-eyed bastard whose greed has no boundary.
That sounds like Ned talking.
No, this is Ned talking.
Magruder is wearing heavy body armor, so attacking him with weapons is completely pointless. There are, however, pockets of gas that are coming up from the ground, so waiting for the perfect opportunity, Colton either throws dynamite on them, wounding Magruder using the large explosion from the gas, or by using a bow with explosive bolts. After he's been damaged enough, Magruder takes refuge on an elevated platform and throws dynamite at Colton. Periodically, he throws one stack of 3 sticks of dynamite, so using his expert shooting abilities, Colton shoots it out of the air, and this causes the cavern to crumble. After a few more explosions, the cavern is in danger of completely collapsing, and Magruder ends up with his leg trapped.
I'd like to shoot you in the teeth, but that would be too kind. Reckon instead I'll take my knife and whittle you some, like you did Soapy, and then slit your throat like you did Jenny. Maybe I'll take this cross, jam it in your good eye, and watch you twitch. None of that'll bring back my ma and pa. or all those villagers you massacred, nor Ned who raised me as his own.
Did you hear that? You hear that?
So long, Major. Give the devil my regards.
Wait. Oh, Jesus is coming down! Get back here! You can't leave me like this! Get back here! I can make it worth a while! Damn you! You're never gonna make it! You'll never make it!
Now our fathers can rest in peace.
And that is it for the story of Gun. A really enjoyable story in my opinion, with many twists and turns along the way. Great cast, great characters, and some enjoyable side quests too. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. But for now, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.